Hi, everyone. Super happy to be here with you this evening. My name is Michael Brenner. I'm a graphic designer by education and profession. I'm also a data and design advocate and facilitator. So tonight, I'd like to share with you a little bit about Data4Change as an organization and some of the community-driven data projects we've created with some amazing organizations from around the world. But first things first. So we hope you'll come away from this evening's chat with a little bit of inspiration, hopefully some new perspectives. And if you've never seen a Data4Change presentation before, we love GIFs, and we hope that you'll come away riding the data unicorn GIF. So let's jump into it. So Data4Change is a nonprofit that empowers other like-minded organizations to use data in their advocacy work. In short, we defend human rights with data. We're a small team with a huge global network of awesome people made up of people like you. We're super passionate about using data storytelling so that we can create projects and moments that hopefully will impact and change the world. Since our launch in 2014, we've co-created about 50 data design stories, projects, and campaigns. And all of those have one thing in common: to change how people think about and engage with the world's most critical issues. So let's take a look at how we do that. So we basically have three streams of work. So the first one that we do is, or that we work with organizations, is to collect data. So we work with our partners to collect new types of data or to aggregate new types of data, either from their communities or open source data, and we do that in a lot of different ways. We do the classic online and offline surveys. We can do, we'll scrape websites. We'll use photos and observational data, like we just saw with Adam's presentation. We'll create data murals. We'll even build some new tech solutions as well. And some of those you can see back here. But one of the things that we really, really take to heart is that data is anywhere and is everywhere and is anything. And so often, due to some of the sensitive natures of topics and contexts that we work in, we also have to look in unexpected places to either collect data or to find new data. Of course, always in safe and secure ways. And oftentimes when we do find that data, it's usually trapped away in spreadsheets. So this is why we try to help organizations to liberate data from the confines of columns, rows, and cells to make data more accessible and more communicable. And so this comes to our second stream of work, in and around our coaching stream. So we also coach organizations to feel more confident and curious to use data. And we do this through our data-focused boot camps, our data fellowships, and we have an in-person data and design sprint, which I think probably some of the people in the audience may have attended. And because each organization has their own unique topics, we often adjust and create unique engagements depending on their needs. So here's just a quick look at some of those topics that we've created, or sorry, not created, but that we've worked on with organizations in the past, from sexual harassment in Egypt, LGBT rights and perceptions in Tanzania, bribery and corruption in Lebanon, women's rights in Iran, internet shutdowns globally, mapping protests and political unrest in Egypt, the impact of the civil war in Yemen, to name a few. And so we also help organizations to communicate data and on these types of topics. And so there's so many different ways that we can communicate data. And here are just some quick examples of some projects that we'll look at before we get into the three projects that I'd like to show you this evening. So here, I don't know if you're going to be able to see my cursor, but down in the lower left-hand corner, we have that blue image. We've got a book that sparks a conversation about child marriage in Jordan. We also have represented here a data-driven poem about personal safety online in Somalia, and a project that we'll talk about here in a little bit, murals capturing data on people's experiences during the pandemic in Nairobi. And we also have a digital rights campaign in Ethiopia with music composed to represent the data, because their specific community and audience was visually impaired. So how do you communicate data to people who have heavy visual impairments? So probably for another conversation, but note how I said communicate here and not visualize. And so maybe Diane, we can set up another talk about that in the future. But one of the ways that we absolutely love to do and to think about all these different types of constraints is actually by hacking the box. And in communicating data, we find more often than not that the answer is literally right in front of us, and that it's a matter of making space to allow ourselves to see it. You don't have to think outside of the box all the time. We find that the more creative and powerful solutions come by hacking the box that we already have. And so we really, really embrace the constraints and the context that we're working in to use those as inspiration for the outputs that we're creating for the data projects. And the other thing that is a key ingredient here is that all of this work is made by amazing people like yourselves and people that have come to our workshops and within our network that have a unique perspective and very diverse backgrounds to collaborate and dream up these ideas and to realize these ideas. Whether it be new forms of campaigns or prototypes or collection methods, methodologies, having a diverse group of people looking at a specific issue, topic, data set, design problem will really spark the creative ideas and change that's needed to tackle some of these very, very difficult issues. So tonight we're gonna take a whirlwind tour to 3 cities. We're going to actually be in Nairobi twice tonight. One for a particular project that was done with one organization, and then another joint organization done between 2 sister organizations between Nairobi and Kampala. And then we're going to be whisked off to Cairo. So buckle up and let's look at some magic. So the first project that we're going to look at is from an organization called the Social Justice Center. And they were interested to know more about their community's perceptions of law enforcement and overall safety of their community within the city in Nairobi. And instead of doing a traditional paper survey or digital survey, they turned to physical interactive murals where participants could indicate their answers with a piece of string that would indicate their responses. So here you've got the data collection method, which becomes the visualization method, but because everyone's there, also sparks a moment of conversation and people realizing that they can connect with other people that have gone through similar lived experiences, which is very, 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 very powerful. And so here's a detail of some of those. So there was the string installation with the nails in the wall, and then there was also another collection method of doing some stencils. But we actually have a video that we made with one of the directors of the organization, Stephen. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to him in this video and let him tell you a little bit more about the project.
When COVID became a crisis in Kenya, life became terrible. Kuna kijana huyo aliuliwa, alikuwa anaishi naita Mabatini, alikutana na maskari walikuwa kwa patrol. Kukutana, alipigwa na askari na akakufa. Si sasa COVID ndio inaua, lakini sasa ni askari alikuwa anaua.
My name is Steven Kinuthia Mwangi. We've been engaging with Data4Change. We've been learning data visualization skills. And from that training that I attended with my colleague Anthony, we thought about setting up a community event where people can come and visualize this data with the same way that we've learned. Well, as you can see on the walls, some of the questions have been highlighted, and the community will come and respond to this. As you can see, for example, there's a question there on who helped us during the COVID-19 pandemic, and people will respond with hearts and just show who was there for them during that time. You can see there are health workers, there's law enforcement, and behind me here, it's questions that are asked, and then people respond by stringing to to each point. We chose to do this so that people can be able to see how these numbers are huge and that these violations should not be taken as being normal. We should not normalize this violence. The impact of having this data now on the walls. When you come and paint a hut there and then later on you come and find that 10 people share the same sentiments that you have about, say, the health workers, you feel that these are important people in the community. So many people have been affected during the enforcement of curfew restrictions. If you express this story to your own family, it's a small number. But as we grow these numbers from one family to an entire community, and we put these numbers up so that people can be able to see them and communicate to them what these numbers are about, it's a very powerful way of organizing communities that have been victimized and have been marginalized. And this is going to go a very long way. Instead of people publishing books that community members are not able to access or to read, we can now put these books on walls and people can be able to read the information and share the knowledge that is organized within the community.
If there's something I would change in my community, that would be awareness. If everyone is aware of what is going on, they will want change in everything that is happening. If you're aware that you're being defied, if you're aware that there's some corruption going somewhere, you will want change for that. So if you create awareness in your community, that is the first step you begin with bringing change.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to leave Nairobi and we're going to continue on to Cairo, where we're going to look at a project called HarassMap. And here we have a project from the organization HarassMap, and their aim is to build a society in Egypt that guarantees a safety for all people from sexual and gender-based violence. This project was first prototyped and evolved, I believe, at our workshop in Beirut in 2016. And these are some of the stills from the project here. One of the interesting things that came out from the design exploration was finding common threads in the story. And down in the lower right-hand corner, where you see that flat static image of all the words, we had mapped all of the different responses from sexual harassment reports that HarassMap had been collecting from the community. So HarassMap essentially crowdsources through SMS and online reports instances in Egypt, or specifically in Cairo, of sexual harassment and maps them. And we'll look at the more refined version here in a second. So that these instances no longer go unseen, uncaptured, and unheard. And it gives the possibility of someone to navigate the city, and it reveals this level of malicious activity that's been happening that was once invisible. And as you can see, there's some very clear clustering here of these instances in the center of the city, and that one particularly, I think, where it's like 1,200, something like that. So you can kind of start to navigate and understand better what's happening where in cities. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that other smaller areas, there may just be less instances of reporting. It doesn't mean that it's happening less there. So as we drill in, we can start to see that there's some very specific patterns in areas where harassment is happening. And if we drill in even deeper, we can look at an individual case and instance as well. And we can, and then we can look at the specific instance where it happened. And the thing that sets this project apart is that you can express support to the person who reported it. Now, the person who reported it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the person that the instance happened to, but that action of sending the support can then be passed on to that person. So it's no longer a single-sided, one-way direction of data, but there's this built-in feedback mechanism into it as well. So now we're going to look at one final project before we conclude here this evening. And we're going to go back to a project that we launched and is still ongoing called The Future with Wakimbizi. This is with two organizations, one in Nairobi and one in Kampala. Youth Voices Community, based in Nairobi, and Young African Refugees for Integral Development, who's based in Kampala. And they are refugee-led organizations who work specifically with urban refugees. Now, this is a term that just started popping up in the last, or 2024, in the last like 4, 5, 6 years. Because if you start looking at the global refugee population, the majority of refugees are in urban areas. And why that becomes problematic is because there's lots of barriers for urban refugees, and they're unable to access a lot of the same life-saving support mechanisms, such as healthcare, economic opportunities, you name it. It becomes very, very difficult because they don't have either ID and documentation, because it's not issued by a specific NGO or INGO governing body like UNHCR, for example, in refugee camps. So you now have groups of people living in urban environments where, yeah, the access is quite limited. So they surveyed their direct communities, and it was over 500 urban refugees. And this was the project that they had come up with and launched earlier this year. They're in the process of working on a new data collection so we can update it. But throughout the piece, there's stories of people's lived experiences. There's some great insights that was pulled from the data. For example, that the average percentage of life lived as a displaced person in both Uganda and Kenya. In Kenya, it was 34% of people's lives. And in Uganda, it was 19%. And many of them are still unable to access some basic needs. So the campaign advocates for more inclusive economy, more inclusive processes for people to obtain ID and documentation so that they can be full participants of their communities. Because despite what popular belief may be, or what the media says, everyone wants to be able to participate in their communities because it just has a bigger effect on everyone around them, and people are able to live their lives as they wish to. And before we wrap up here, some of the examples of people of YVC and YARD interacting with their communities here, collecting data. In the second phase, they took a more similar approach to collecting the data, as we saw with the Mahari Social Justice Center. They created these booklets where people actually aren't filling in surveys by paper, filling in dots with pen and paper or with pen and pencil, but they're actually doing it in groups together with stickers. So the booklets are the surveys, kind of dot survey, where people put stickers on various responses, and then the data is digitized, and we're waiting for the results to come in to update the communication outputs that they've created, and also to pair them up and see how the data may influence some of the new advocacy recommendations that both YVC and YARD have for both of their local governments. And so with that, thank you so much for giving us a space and time today to share these amazing projects. And as you can see, these were definitely the micro level data of the lived experiences of people versus I think what we'll probably see from Joost and on the macro level, and also from Adam. So thank you so much.